All right. So officially, welcome everyone to today's professional development series. This is one I'm particularly excited about. My name is Sarah McAllister. I am the Senior Associate Director for the Office of Alumni Career and Professional Development, and I'll let Nina introduce herself as well.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Nina Rafo. I'm the Assistant Director of Career and Professional Development of Tulane Alumni Relations, and I'll be all things tech today. So if you have any issues with anything, you can just direct message me in the chat.
Perfect. So a few housekeeping things before I hand it over to Tara Quinn. So this is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. We have over 60 videos of previous PDS sessions on there. So if you're not familiar with it, we encourage you to take a look after today's session. This session will also be uploaded this afternoon or tomorrow for you to access and to share far and wide. So with that, we do want this to be a conversation. Tara's going to have a couple prompts during the time to share in the chat. There's going to be time at the end for Q&A. So if you haven't had the joy and opportunity to see her present in the past, she is phenomenal. I know I'm going to learn a ton, and I know that you will too. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Tara. Thank you for being here, and I just can't wait to hear from you today.
Thank you so much. And to everyone who is here, first and foremost, thank you to Nina and Sarah and the whole alumni development team for allowing me to be here. I am a Tulane alumna, and I'm excited about bringing this message to Tulane and to all of you today, the community. Just to give you a little quick soundbite about what you can expect today and why I happen to be the messenger. Essentially to answer the question, why should I trust this woman when she tells me that taking a bit of a break won't necessarily ruin my career trajectory? This is one of my very favorite topics to talk about. I am a licensed, certified and credentialed career coach. And since the beginning, I've been really focused on essentially dealing with the effects of burnout that I've seen become more and more and more prevalent over the last 15 to 20 years in the workforce. Taking time off is a newer conversation, and it used to be considered kind of heretical. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I'm really interested in kind of opening up the conversation that we have about what does it mean to build a career, and how can you build in mindful pauses, spaces for breathing room, essentially areas where you can check your compass and see if you're heading in the right direction. So on that note, I think that a lot of us are aware that there is an old story around any type of break in your career, any type of questionable area of resume. And the idea travel would be career ending. It will lead to some type of gap, some type of inexplicable pause on your resume. And how are you going to explain that to people? Don't do it. That was the old philosophy. What I'm inviting us all to think about is not only can you get it, but that it can actually be incredibly enhancing to your career trajectory. Not only is it something that you might be able to just hide, it's something you should brag about. And it's something that will grow you both as a person and as a professional. So in order to do that, we want to look at what you're going to walk away with today. I also promise you this will not be PowerPoint. Slides will be few. They'll mostly be pretty photos and little bullet points to help you figure out where we are. So this is the first one of those. What you're going to walk away with today, number one, is a bit of vision, a little bit more clarity on what might be right for you if this is something you might want to think about, and a little bit of drive, a little bit of inspiration. Number two is tips and best practices, because you can have the most beautiful dream in the world, but without at least a beginning idea of how to start executing on that plan, it can feel overwhelming and keep you from starting. So we'll talk about some tips and best practices in terms of how to navigate before, during, and after your time on the road, or if you choose to stay home, before, during, and after whatever break you choose to take. And then number three, you'll walk away with some solid next steps. So before we end today, I'm going to be asking you to think about one thing that you can do for yourself to begin moving this dream in the right direction for you. And drive, tips and best practices, and solid next steps. From there, we want to start with where you are now. During any journey, if you're trying to figure out where you're headed, we've all had a moment where you're going, wait, where am I? It could be at the mall. It could be at an amusement park. It could be while we're traveling. You have to stop, check the map, and do the, all right, well, that's where I want to go. Where am I now? So to that end, take a moment, check in with yourself. And the question to ask is, if I'm going to a networking event and I meet someone new, I shake their hand, what do I tell them about myself as I prepare to exchange business cards? What do I say about myself at your average networking event? And then when you have an idea of that, if a few people could share in the chat, what is it that you say about yourself at a networking event? And then Nina or Sarah can let us know, like, what are the themes that they're seeing in the chat in terms of what people say when they introduce themselves? And we'll give this 20 to 30 seconds. One of the things I'm already seeing in the chat is people will say where they're from. What else do you normally give as like a quick point of fact about yourself?
I know for me, it's typically what you do, right? Where you work, job role.
Exactly. Yep, I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm a marketing professional, where I work, job role. Perfect. I see a lot of that. Well, we often give where we're from, but almost always some of our first identifiers. Yep, name, title, location, years in current position. I love this. I love that someone's already saying I love to share what my outside interests are as well. Fun fact, usually a hobby. Excellent. So a lot of people, and this is it's not necessarily universal, but very common, that the first things that we reach for about ourselves, one of the people that I met who was former military said, well, I used to give name, rank,
All right, hang on, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm sure with this weather, it's not helping. Hang tight.
So to that end, there's a different question. So what we want to ask in terms of planning a career break is this. Saw this quote from Jack Kerouac, and it helped me shift the way I was thinking about my planned trip, because I was being very practical about it. And I thought, what would happen if I came to the planning phase of this trip, not from the what would be practical, what might I be able to hide on a resume, but it would be the dream trip that could change me and help me, not as a person, but as a professional, that would make me a better hire when I come home and a happier, more centered and energized person. That needs to be a dream trip. So I want everyone to take a moment and for just a second, think about what a trip might look like, a certain piece of your life, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years. And what would it look like, quote, drove you? I saw that my life was a vast, glowing, empty page, and I could do anything I wanted. If you had a magic wand, what would your trip look like? Capture just a couple thoughts. And if anyone would like to share in the chat, let me know. I love this. A personal journey that is also fulfilling. Ooh, I love that someone called out a break at home to plan for an extended period of travel. Reading books, traveling to see family and friends, and sleeping. I'm hearing a lot of personal nourishment. Care, fun, adventure. So this is a question that we want to drive your mindset today. We're kind of stretching out that muscle of what's allowed to think about what might be possible. And the reason that this area, like this way of focusing, this way of coming at the question is so important is that it makes more possible, and it helps us deal with what I refer to as the inspiration gap that often keeps people from actually hitting the road and realizing their dreams. So to help you understand what I mean by the inspiration gap, there's a quote from the French author Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. He's most known in the United States as the author of The Little Prince. And he once said that if you want to build a boat, don't just gather up a group of people, give them orders, and show them where you have the wood and the tools. I'm paraphrasing. But what he said is, in order to truly build a boat, you must teach them to long for the vast and endless sea. And what I've found both with myself and also with my clients is that begin with trying to gather up a crowd where the wood and the tools are all, that leads up to the schematics for the boat that you see here on this screen. And this is where we get lost. We get overwhelmed with the mechanics of how to make a dream happen. And this is often, as learners, where we begin, often in academia as well. A good way to think of this is if you've ever been to an IKEA. And I know that for those of us on the Gulf South, we don't have one nearby. But for those of you who have, you know this. And for those of you who haven't, I'll explain. When you go to an IKEA, there is a distinct entryway and a distinct exit, and you are not supposed to enter through the exit. And there's a reason for that, because they are walking you into the inspiration. You walk through the showroom, you look at the couch, you sit on it, you imagine your books on that bookshelf. They do this on purpose, because by the time you get to the warehouse, which is where all of your dreams sit in flat pack glory, you're already committed. You've seen your books on that shelf. You've felt that pillow on your cheek. You're not excited about it, but you'll deal with it because you feel the dream. We need to do that ourselves with our own dreams to make them really robust enough that we'll deal with the logistics of making them happen. So I encourage you to think of making any major project, any major renovation of your life, including but not limited to a travel dream, a sabbatical dream, a career break dream. Think of it like an IKEA warehouse. Don't jump immediately to these schematics. You'll freak out justifiably because you haven't yet given yourself the chance to feel yourself on that boat, to feel the sun on your face, the wind in your hair, smell the sea salt. That's what you need to build in the beginning. So I encourage you to start being really specific about what you dream of, not just, oh, I'd love to have a break, but I'd love to take 6 months and come back fluent in a foreign language, to code, having time with my family in a foreign country and connected to my, whatever it is that really fuels your dream. It's not the planning, it's the vision. And the secret is once you have that, once you can smell that salty air and feel that sunshine on your face, even if it's just the dream, you'll deal with building the boat. So if you are thinking about your trip, overwhelmed with, oh my gosh, and who's going to watch the cat? And then we're going to have to talk to my mom. That's okay. But return to the well of your inspiration. If this picture on the left gets your heart rate up, it means you need to nourish in the right, the picture on the right. So that's just a way to think about it, that philosophy of make your dream strong and fortify it regularly. You will need what I consider armor of inspiration to keep you going. So that's just something to think about there. On top of that, it often helps to hear from people who have been there and done that in advance. So I have permission from a couple former clients to just share a few of their words so that you can be inspired by what they have done. This is a woman named Melissa, and she spent well over a year on the road traveling all over. She went through South America, across Asia and Europe. And what she has to say to you, this was her answer to, if you could speak to people who are thinking, just maybe dreaming about what you did, what would you say? And her words to you are, What I can say is that I've learned so much about myself and my limits, which turn out to be much higher than I knew. I've grown stronger, learned to appreciate people and life in a whole new way. I didn't make this decision because I hated my job or was running away. I just had a deep desire for new experiences, and so far this has been one of the best decisions I've ever made. Not only have the experiences been unforgettable and life-changing, but I also have more clarity into what I want to do career-wise and how I want to live my life moving forward. 100% recommend to anyone thinking about doing it, and I would never have done it without your help and encouragement. So that's Melissa. And then we can also hear from Clara. She went and was incredibly intrepid. She went across Central Asia, Africa. So she spent, I believe, a year in total. And what she had to say was, after 7 years of being a dutiful employee in the tech, I had no idea how to approach the idea of leaving with my bosses. And I had a really hard time even thinking about quitting. This process helped me prep for that conversation, play out different scenarios, and position myself to keep those doors open. With your guidance, I've gone from those conversations confidently and got the results I wanted. We so often define ourselves by our work, but taking time away forced me to define myself by other terms. I got to practice this over and over with locals, other travelers, and everyone I met on the road. As I listened to myself after each iteration, I became more aware of and confident in being who I really am. Bringing forward a more authentic persona has changed the nature of my engagement with others in a way that lends itself to more meaningful interactions. So there's some great, hers is long, so I'll just give her the last bit. So the biggest benefit of extended time away for me has been recovery and reflection. Pre-trip, my daily rhythm of 5 a.m. wake-ups and 2-hour commutes, plus that 24/7 always on corporate culture and social FOMO was a recipe for burnout. Only in creating this kind of me time did I regain energy, health, and motivation. My outlook for the future is 100% more positive, and I can now see a clear path to get there. So this speaks to some of the benefits that you can get. And as you can hear, some of them are personal, but a lot of it is also professional clarity, renewed network. So now we're going to dive into, how do you make this happen for yourself? A bit of inspiration for you, kind of stretching out that muscle of what we tend to think is possible or allowed in Western corporate culture, and look at, now you've seen some people who've done it. And I have worked with hundreds of clients over the years who also have. So let's talk about how you might be able to. An overarching philosophy is that you're going to want to think of your career as a garden. We often think of a career path as a little bit static, almost Legos. It's building blocks. Okay, we have this one, and then we snap this in, and we build and build and build. These days, careers are much more organic. And if we tend them in the right way, they will respond to return after a bit of a break. What do I mean by that? This is very tempting, and especially if you have ever been at a place of real burnout, you have probably sympathized with that classic scene from Office Space, and I know I'm dating myself, but where they take what used to be known as a fax machine into a field and a baseball bat. We've all been there at some point, but that's not the place from which to handle taking leave of whatever position you're in at the moment. So allow yourself to have a therapeutic vent with a trusted friend who will keep it to themselves. And then consider what will need to be done with your career in order to weatherproof it. So this comes from many of the people that I grew up with in New England. I came down to Tulane and did not miss the weather, but I grew up in New England and I knew so many people who had the most beautiful gardens that would not seem compatible with some of the harsh winters that we had to live through and some of that really cold weather. And I remember talking to my grandmother at one point. I said, how do these rose bushes survive the winter? And she said, well, you just have to be wise and you have to weatherproof. And I remembered her counsel later when I'm a client. It's not that you can't take leave of your current career. It's that you need to handle weatherproofing appropriately. If you don't do this, will you have a garden when you come home? Probably not. So don't dismantle the fax machine or whatever the current technology is. Talk to the right people, appropriate conversations. What to look like. Before your trip, your tips and best practices can be put into the following buckets. You're going to want to shore up your networks, update your resume, and guide the narrative. This is the time for a little bit of public relations and marketing, rather than just leaving. So for example, if Sarah just disappeared from Tulane Alumni Development tomorrow, we would have to come up with a story in her absence. Where did she go? I don't know, she just disappeared. However, if she said, I'm going to be taking this particular amount of time to grow my professional background, I'm going to be volunteering, I'm going to be studying languages, I'm actually going to be researching what they're doing in alumni development in Asia and Latin America and Europe. Ooh, that's a conversation. I'm not speaking for Sarah, I'm just pulling these things out of a hat. So I just want to be, she's not going anywhere. I'm just using her as a generous example. That's a conversation though. If Sarah took a break and was like, oh my gosh, did you know that she's like meeting with these universities in Copenhagen and Johannesburg? She's finding out what they're doing for their alumni. That's going to build her as a professional. Meanwhile, pro tip, she's on the road having the time of her life. And we're at home talking about what an incredible professional she is. This is the time to make that happen. You'll continue that while you're traveling, but in the beginning, you're going to want to do a couple things. Guiding the narrative is all about making sure that everyone else is an ambassador telling the story that you want them to tell. That's about letting them know, how are you building your skill sets and your professional experience while you're on the road? It doesn't mean you can't tell them that you're having fun. You know, you're taking art classes, you're studying urban planning, whatever it is that you're doing, but that you're also letting them know how you're going to be a hot hire when you come home. You'll also want to update your resume. Once you're on the road, again, you will be having so much fun and learning and growing. It'll be all about new input. It's going to be hard to remember, what were those fresh deliverables? What was the most impressive thing about you before you left? You're way more impressive now. So put a fresh coat of paint and polish on your resume before you leave. What are your most recent, most impressive deliverables? Essentially, think metrics, the things that will be a little bit lost to the fog of time as you're out there growing. Make sure they're highlighted. And last but not least, shoring up your networks looks like a few different things. Number one, guiding that narrative, making sure people know where you are at in your growth, but also setting up informational interviews and letting people know the purpose of your trip, but also whether or not you're interested in returning to your current field or potentially using this trip to pivot. So that could look like letting people know how long you plan to be gone, which can be flexible. But if you know that you'll be gone 3 to 6 months, tell them 3 to 6 months, that they have that in mind. You can always extend or shorten it. They have a realistic understanding. If you might be interested in taking on project work or remote work while you're gone, that's another thing to leave in the conversation. They might come across a project where it's, we don't have the budget to hire someone, but we need this 6-week project done. It's a shame Sarah's not on campus, she'd be great for it. Turns out she would want that revenue and she could handle it in 15 hours a week. So those types of things are considerations for the conversations that you're having. Informational interviewing, guiding the narrative of what you're up to, presenting your most recent, polished, flawless resume to people, and letting them know the trip, the scope of your trip, the intended impact of your trip, and how you might be open to interacting with them even before you leave and while you're gone. So those are the before you leave high level tips and best practices. While you're on the road, you will also have some things you're going to want to keep an eye on. As we've been discussing, continuing to enhance your professional experience and skill sets. That can be things like volunteering, part-time work while you're gone, learning new languages, certifications. It does not have to look like traditional academic and or professional training, but it can. It could be taking a certificate course abroad. I've had clients volunteer with Doctors Without Borders ships. I've had them study at Oxford, the Sorbonne. There's so many different things that you can do. However, I encourage you to explore those official opportunities and think outside of the box about the way that you are growing. And one example that I have permission to share is that I had a client once who ended up in Central America for a little bit longer than she'd originally planned. And she sent me a bit of a mildly panicked message and said, I'm concerned that I'm not growing the way I thought I would. I don't know if I can pitch myself returning home. Let's hop on a quick call. And I got on the phone with her and I said, well, what are you concerned about? And she said, I'm having the time of my life. I'm learning to surf. I'm hanging out with like handsome Australians all day long. I'm not growing as a professional. This is fun, but I'm not growing. And I said, well, you've been in Central America a lot longer than you originally had budgeted for. How's that been possible? Oh, well, I'm living at this surf camp and they were kind of off the grid and I've set up their website for them and I'm getting them set up with Square. And okay, hold on. She set up their social media, developed. So essentially she had deliverables that she had done as a marketing professional and a branding professional, but because she was having so much fun, went right over that she was working. So I sat there and I listened to her saying this and I said, well, what I'm actually hearing is that you are contributing to the edification of a small business in Latin America. And she went, yes, I am. That's great. Start collecting deliverables. What did their business look like before you? What does it look like now? Get testimonials. And so that fixed it. Keep in mind that you will be having so much fun, you might not even realize the ways in which you are developing as a professional. So trained to this old paradigm of no pain, no gain. So my invitation is, do think, are there academic and or professional containers available to me around the world that
All
taking
right.
advantage of? Absolutely. But it is worth calling out, please be mindful of social media use, especially with how ubiquitous sharing has become. We remember that the internet is forever. What I mean by this is it is absolutely acceptable to use social media in a mindful, collaborative, and positive way. Talk about how you're growing as a professional. You might even make mention of the fact that you miss some of your colleagues and you're looking forward to being part of an amazing team again. What you're not going to want to do is grumble about the fact that you don't miss Bob from accounting, or, oh, thank God I don't work for that boss anymore. You might feel it. Keep it on the inside, or say it to trusted friends who won't repeat it. It's okay to wake up to the fact that you don't miss some of the situations that might have been challenging or maybe even toxic that were part of your previous experience. Don't put it on the internet. Don't be salty on the web. It is forever. Use it to build yourself and keep the snarky comments to a side. Pick up a pen and an old school travel journal, put them in your travel journal. They'll just be for you. And then number two, even though it's in the middle, think about how you can network proactively before re-entry. This ties back to the informational interviewing and the proactive networking that you did before you left. Because those are people that if you hadn't touched base with them before you left, it might feel a bit jarring for them to hear from you as you're coming home. But if you'd communicated with them and they were aware of your trip, the purpose of it, and you've been in touch while you've been gone, pro tip, maybe you've even sent a little gift from the road, send gifts from the road, or a postcard from the road. If you have been keeping in touch with your personal and professional networks in a way that feels kind and collaborative, they'll be very happy to hear from you again. If you didn't talk to them before you left and you ignored them while you were gone, it feels a little forward to ask them to help you when you come home. But hey, if you sent them pralines from New Orleans while you were passing through on your trip, and now you want to talk to them about projects, they'll be happier if you've sent them some chicory coffee before you come home. So think about that. Networking proactively is about contacts, but it's also about kind of connection and how you've kept those going. That can look like something as simple as a month or two before you want to return, or a few weeks before you want to return. If you know, I'm ready to head back in this direction, communicating that to those people, and or getting some meetings and calls set up for when you come home. So just to summarize, enhancing your professional experience and skill sets while you're on the road. Think outside of just regular old school academia, tourism, and or volunteering. Network proactively before you come home, in addition to keeping contacts and communication going in a good way while you're traveling. And do be mindful of social media use so that it doesn't come back to bite you later. And then when you get home, first and foremost, you're going to want to do some soul searching. Is your former field where you want to return? For some people, that is a heartfelt and enthusiastic yes. They didn't dislike medicine or education or law or sanitation. They just needed a breather. But for other people, their trip might have changed them or moved them in a certain way, and they're looking to go in a different direction. Their trip may have prepared them for that through educational and or volunteer opportunities. So they'll be communicating that with people. You're also going to want to flaunt it. One of the questions I used to get from almost everyone was, quote, how do I hide this? How do I gloss over this? How can I make this just invisible on my resume? 15 years ago, that might have been a more valid concern. These days, don't. Put it on your resume in a way that is correct for you. What you have accomplished is brag-worthy. If you take a trip like this and people can't see the value in it, help them. Budgeting and forecasting, project management, intercultural communication, self-management, self-leadership. Oh, you are going to get frustrated on the road, friends. When someone says to you, tell me about a time that you handled something challenging in a workplace, sure, tell them about the time Excel crashed. But then tell them about the time your train was 10 hours late in India. You had to bum a ride from a Buddhist nun. True story. Yeah, bummed a ride from a Buddhist nun. One of the best experiences of my life started with an absolute transportation disaster. So flaunt it. Think about that your travels have made you not only a better person who's more comfortable in your own skin, but a better colleague. Who do you want to be stuck with at the office at 2 a.m.? The person who's incredibly burned out and disillusioned? Or the person who's like, look, I know it's obnoxious, much energy, but I just got road. So let me help you guys handle this. So it builds resilience. It builds you as a person, but it also builds skill sets. What are the things you learned on the road that a boss would be a fool not to embrace in the workplace? And then translate it. Speak corporate. To be fair, a hiring manager might not care that that woman I mentioned previously got to learn how to surf and hang out with a bunch of cool Australians. They are going to care that she helped build a small business, that she learned Spanish, that she is now able to think on her feet and handle hardship, and that she has an understanding of cross-cultural communication that covers multiple continents, and an understanding of how marketing and communications work in different cultures. So those types of things. Think about what you did on the road and then translate backpack to boardroom. So those are some tips for coming home. On that note, last but not least, before we dive into a nice I like to leave a good spacious communication question and answer / talk session at the end. But before you do, I want you to take a minute to think about where we began, the inspiration of it, cracking open a little bit more of that. Okay, what would this look like if I could dream? Not just, okay, recharging my batteries into a 3-day weekend, but if I had a magic wand and didn't worry yet about the how, what would I do? Take a moment, pull that back into your mind, and write down 1 or 2 things that you could do today or tomorrow in the next 24 hours to knock over that first domino and begin this process. I like that I'm seeing so many foreheads. This is great. Everyone is heads down. And then last but not least, we'll be jumping to Q&A. which is really, I hope, going to be a rich conversation. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and answering any, kind of questions that you may have. But if anyone would like to follow up on this, I see we have a good crowd today, so it might take a couple weeks, but if anyone would like to set up just a complimentary consultation, you are more than welcome to either call me or email me, and we could do that in the next couple of weeks, because this will allow you to marinate for a few days, think a little bit about what inspired you most today or spurred your thinking, and then we could dig a little bit deeper into your particular situation. So just so that you have my information, and the other thing that will be sent out to you today, we were going to try to play it. We didn't want to risk a tech snafu, but there's a 3 or 4 minute video that we'll be sending to you that was made. It's just a little lagniappe, because we're Tulanians. So we always like to add a little bit of extra special lagniappe to the end of anything. For anyone who is not a New Orleanian or from Louisiana, lagniappe is essentially just a little sweet extra that is given to valued friends or customers. It's essentially the 13th donut in a baker's dozen. So because y'all came today, you are welcome to a little lagniappe of a complimentary consultation. And also you will be receiving a video about someone else who thought he was planning a year-long trip and it ended up being 3 years. It's just a wonderful, shot in the arm for people who might be interested in taking some time off. So without further ado, I'm going to switch it to the Q&A slide, and we have a nice spacious little breathing period to chat about who's in the room, what your travel dreams are, and I can answer anything you have.
All right, thank you so much. I'd love to kick off the Q&A as people are thinking about what questions they have. I know there were a few kind of comments in the chat through your presentation about questions around particularly like career breaks that don't involve travel. And so I would love to hear from you a little more about in speaking about the inspiration piece of like, how do you talk to people in terms of how do they have that inspiration when it's maternity leave, when it's taking care of a loved one, things like that?
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. This particular workshop does have a lot of travel motifs. You see the planes, you see the maps. Many of my clients do not leave home. What we're looking at with any break is for it to be mindful. So even if it's maternity leave, paint me a picture. If you had a magic wand, what would maternity leave look like? What would taking care of that family member look like? Thank you for bringing that up, because I got chills when you asked. It's not about hitting the road. It's about for the sake of what? If you're going to travel, to what end? It's not just, okay, and this is not, I don't want to disparage lying on the beach, because I want to be very clear. I love a good beach read. So I am not disparaging the beach or a good be lazy, forget what day it is for a few days. But for the sake of what? So yes, go lie on the beach, go read, take the maternity leave, take the time off to care for a relative or a friend. But what does it look like? What does a successful maternity leave look like? Not just surviving it. So I have actually worked with people who are going on leave, and what we ask is, what does your leave look like? How does it nourish you? How does it impact the people that are involved? And essentially, I hate to use the phrase KPIs because I know it's a corporate phrase, but what are your key performance indicators? What does happiness look like? What does recharged look like? We say we're going to take time off. What does an ideal schedule look like? And we actually will get into the nitty-gritty of that. I'm taking an art class in addition to maternity leave. I'm nourishing myself. By the end of this, I have X, Y, and Z that I can point to and say, this was an output of the time I took. One example is I had someone who was going on maternity leave who said, I can't even believe we have a kid now. We haven't even finished renovating the house. At the end of this, I want a fully renovated home. Right now I have a house. And we defined specifically, what does home look like? And by the end, she had it. So if you do not want to travel, how do you want, you are here, that pinpoint we looked at in the beginning, how is that different in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months.
Thank you. And I see Whitley has his hand raised. You want to ask a question?
Excellent.
I would love to ask a question. Hello. Thank you so much, Tara. This is really cool. And I have a question about somebody who is in the middle of a career break, that's somebody being myself. So I have, thank you. I have kind of, I'm nearing the end of what I hope to be my career break. And I have traveled, I've done the things I've wanted to do, particularly just this summer for the past 3 or so months. And feel like I've, a lot of the things, I feel like I was pretty mindful and whatnot. And now that I'm nearing the end of said break, what are your recommendations on next steps in, staying in a career and like moving out of the career break? I know we talked a lot about like going into it. What's kind of like the circle back to getting back into the workforce?
Perfect. I would say definitely let me know if you would like to chat more in depth, because we could actually come up with like kind of a plan. But the first question that I would always ask is, where would you ideally like to land? Like if you had a fairy godmother, godfather, and or a magic wand, if you were going to land the job that you can't even believe you were offered and or the opportunity, where do you want to land next?
It's a great question.
That would be my first question. So if you don't have that answer, that's 100% okay.
And I do. So if those, yes, I think maybe I'll set up a consultation.
Okay, let me know.
Yeah.
So essentially, we can get into your specifics on the consultation. I love it. That would be my first question, because any type of quality coaching in my book has an element of gap analysis to it. Where you are now, that's why we had that you are here point. So your state of the union, your where we are now is nearing the end of a career break. Awesome. If you had that magic wand, where do you land? That is our where you want to get to. So then with coaching, what we'll be looking at in your consultation is what's the delta between where you are now and where you want to be ending up? And then this space in here, how do we answer that using your sabbatical? So you and I will chat about what you learned on your sabbatical. And essentially we thread the needle for future employers to explain to them, look, here's where you want to land. And here's why you'd be a fool not to hire him for that, because this prepared him in this way. So what we'll do on your consultation is essentially build that narrative specifically for you. But that's an excellent question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any follow-up?
Okay, so we have another question about, can you talk, the question is, can you talk about visa work eligibility in other countries?
Certainly. So that's something that comes out. What I say with every client is you will be bespoke. Every client comes away with some type of mindful, nourishing breathing room. But to your very good point, it's not always travel. It's not always maternity leave. It's not always renovating a house. And so for everyone, your visa requirements will vary depending on what passport or passports you hold, how long you want to be in any particular region, and the reason for being in that region. So what I tell people is when you start to go to those questions of, oh gosh, visas, stop for one. You are in the warehouse, and it's where we tend to jump first. So essentially you went into the exit door of the IKEA and you're standing there going, where do I get an Allen wrench? A visa is an Allen wrench. Do you need it? Sure. Do you need it right now? No, you don't even know where you're going yet. So visas are very important, but the good news is this, the information is out there. A way to trip yourself up in advance before you even need to worry, especially if you hold a US passport. A lot of entry will be, passport on entry and or easily arranged in advance, either via a consulate or online. If you have a more restricted passport, what I will say is this, it sometimes requires a little bit of work in advance, but I have never had a client not able to go where they wanted to go with the appropriate footwork put in ahead of time. I myself have had to procure some really complicated visas, including recently I was able to travel to Bangladesh in 2019, which was amazing. but required paperwork in advance. So absolutely worth it. But think about when you start to ask questions about logistics, serving you yet? Are you at that planning portion of the trip yet? It may be that you need to allow yourself to marinate in the dreaming space for a bit. Or if you're really fortified on your dream and you're ready to talk visas, good news. If you're working with me, we sort it out, we find you the right info. And or if you're doing this independently, thank goodness for the internet. As often a place where we can waste a lot of time, it also has a lot of info we need. So visas are sortable, if that makes sense. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so what tips do you have for preserving the lessons and mindfulness I've gained from my career break as I prepare to enter back into the business atmosphere, which is very different from the environment I was in this past year?
That's a great question. So number one, I would say, and this is going to date me, keep a travel journal of some sort. I often encourage old school writing things down. Make a messy notebook where you can paste in ticket stubs and have people sign it and press flowers between the pages. I know this makes me sound 111 years old, but you will treasure it as an artifact of your trip, as a place where you can truly be private with yourself. Grumble about Bob from accounting, but do it in your travel journal. Capture the things that mean the most to you, the people that have influenced you, the light bulb moments that have formed your journey. The other thing that a travel journal will do for you, whether it's digital or analog, is remind you of how far you have come. Because I mean this from the bottom of my heart, you will not believe the way that time off, whether it's travel or home, changes you. It just allows your soul and your body to breathe a little bit. Your mind can wander. And the one thing I will say is that academia has known this for decades. Academia is actually one of the fields where sabbaticals have been championed. Why? Because academics know that you do your best deep focus and or transformational work when you're not distracted. So in order to capture that, I recommend travel journals, scrapbooking, whatever brings you joy. Some people actually do also blog. If blogging brings you joy, do it. Check in with yourself first. Some people will keep a travel blog or journal out of a feeling of obligation. We always want whatever vehicles and or tools you use for your experience to feed you. So if you don't relish the idea of using a lot of social media or blogging, do not feel obligated. Likewise, if you love the idea of building a travel blog, keep in mind that it will be viewed by future potential hiring managers, but feel free to keep it. In terms of the lessons, highlight them when you see them. I have had clients send me really moving emails about what they call their ahas or their breakthroughs or their light bulbs or their face palms. Those moments when something occurs to you that really just changes your life in a way that you're like, that should have been self-evident. Capture them. Then, as we were mentioning on the returning tips, speak corporate. Think about ways that something just changed your outlook. How do you explain that into a hiring manager and might be useful for them? A way to get to that quickly is, how does this skill save and or money for an organization or an individual? Or how could this skill reduce and or eliminate pain points for an organization or an individual? So if your trip made you one of just the most mellow, adaptable people you've ever met, and you can't believe it because work used to make you very anxious, let people know, well, I have to be honest with you, my outlook has made me pretty bulletproof when it comes to, because here's what I dealt with on the road. Here's what that means for you. I'm the unflappable employee that you can call. Everything hits the fan and you need someone to help. So think about, how did you change? What are your deepest learnings? And then in a non-cynical way, get curious about how to either make money for someone, make their lives easier, reduce pain points. And that's how you speak corporate.
What's your advice for budgeting for this type of experience, assuming this would be without a salary?
Excellent question. The joke is wisdom in this. Think about how long you want to be gone, come up with what you think is a reasonable budget. And when I work with people, we talk about some tools for getting a handle on that. And then the joke is pack twice as much money and half as many clothes, or half as much stuff. That is not necessarily going to need to happen, but it's a good way to think about it. I tell people that I have seen clients string things together on $1,000 a month. They were sleeping on beaches and eating beans and rice. And so what we look at is two things. Number one, what is your desired outcome of your trip? And number two, how long would you ideally like to be gone? And then for budget, we look at what regions of the world you might want to travel in. Where can you get the experiences that you want at the price point that could be attainable for you? And we talk about there is a significant amount.
All right, we know she's going to come back, so just hang on.
Yeah.
Competitive about it, what would it look like if you were like really backpacking, like vagabonding? And so what I want to make sure each client is equipped with is a range, an understanding of if I really need to nourish and I really need a couple weeks of 4-star, like what is that budget? And then we have an accordion budget. The joke is twice as much money, half as much stuff. But what I want you to know is you have this much to spend if you need to. But we want you to come home with quite a bit of it. You usually end up in the mid-range. And for most of my clients on any extended trip, and this is a philosophy that I aspire to as well, it tends to be a bit of a wave in terms of budget output. You get a little bit competitive and then you spend a couple weeks at a hostel and you're like eating burritos. And then you're like, all right, I've had enough of that. 3-star hotel. Let's go pay for a pool pass at like the Rosewood. And then you get competitive again. So a budget should be fluid and generous. A couple places to start looking for that online do show quote unquote daily budgets per country. One thing to keep in mind is that as North Americans, we are very used to expensive travel. So if you travel as a typical North American, we usually travel as a consumer product, by which I mean we're staying at resorts. We're splashing out, y'all. Like, look, we work 50, 51 weeks a year. When we get a week or two off, let's go crazy, right? The transportation is only amortized over a week or two. If you're taking 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, that flight might have still been $600, $800, $900 round trip, but it's spread over 3 months instead of 1 week. You might be house sitting and or volunteering, so your accommodations might be less. Essentially, when it comes to budgeting, we come up with a luxury budget and then make sure that you know that you can exist in here. And also when you get competitive about it, it happens sooner or later. Everyone gets to like, could I live off $25 a day? And that's actually an important part of your education on the road or during your time off. So that's the budgeting. And each client is going to be very different based on desired outcome of trip, desired activities, potential regions they would like to explore. And we look at all of it. We always pad. It's so much better to come home and be like, oh my gosh, I have $5,000 left. I thought I would spend in, so.
Mhm.
Questions?
All right, so we've got one last question. If you are on a career break and trying to get back into the workforce, what kinds of questions should you ask yourself / what jobs to look for when you need to get a job soon for financial reasons and have to broaden the search to lower paying jobs outside your field or jobs that you wouldn't want to stay in? So like the financial bridge jobs.
A lot of times a lot of my clients coming home, they'll take what one of them referred to as a jobby job or a part-time job. If it is helpful to think of it this way. You can consider that as part of your career break. When you say like, it's a job I wouldn't want to stay in, what I'm hearing is that essentially it's a vehicle of your career break. So again, it would be the same question that I asked earlier. Where do you want to land? If I handed you that magic wand, what is your ideal landing pad? And then how does this job help you get there? Even if it's just cash flow. And if it is just pure cash flow, you might not even need to communicate much of it to a future hiring manager, because you are still highlighting the big experiences and growth that you experienced on your full career break to get you to that landing job. So if it's just cash flow, it's just cash flow. It's just part of the journey of your career break.
So that is the end of our questions. Thank you so much. Would you like to close us out before we end?
I would love to. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who has been here today. I know that time is by far one of our most valuable resources. I'm really honored you chose to spend a bit of it with us today. And as I said, if anyone does want to dig into more of the detailed work, so that person who was asking about getting to the end of a career break and what do I do with it, kind of a jobby job, let me know if you'd like to talk about what that looks like specifically for you. And if you have ever dreamed of a trip like this, I mean this sincerely, if I can do this, anyone can do this. And I have hundreds of clients who are cheering you on jubilantly from the sidelines.
Awesome.
I've done that, you can do it too.
Thank you, Tara. This has been amazing. Oh, someone was asking, do you have can they connect with you on LinkedIn, and do you have like a newsletter or anything on LinkedIn?
We do. So there are so many people that do great newsletters. When I tell people when you want to start a business, like they ask me, do you have to do blogs? And I say, not if you're willing to do workshops. I promise not to clutter your inbox is the easiest way of saying it. I don't tend to email out. I love when people come to me, and my thing is, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I am there, but I promise I won't clutter your mailbox at all. Feel free to come find me, and I would be
Awesome.
happy to talk to you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Tara, thank you again for today. This was amazing.
For having
And
me.
enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Thank you all.
Thank you.